Welcome. My name is Neil Vernon. I'm a member of the Sons of the American Revolution, and this presentation today is about the history of the American flag. But before we get started, I'd like to present to you a little bit of local history since we're here in the state of Washington. The state of Washington flag is the only flag in the United States that has a portrait of a former president. It happens to be George Washington. Now, what's unique about this flag is that it was first designed by the Daughters of the American Revolution. And you'll note that on the seal of the flag that the state of Washington became the state in 1889. This flag did not become the official flag of Washington State until 1923. Before Washington State was a state, it was a territory. It became a territory on February 14th, 1859, when Oregon became the 33rd state, represented by the 33 stars underneath their seal. Oregon became a state and is the only state that has two distinct sides to their flag. Go Beavers! The other thing that's important about this flag is that Oregon became a state in 1859, did not receive the official flag of the state until 1925, 2 years after Washington State received their flag. Now, even at that time, before Oregon became a state, it was known as the Oregon Territory. The Oregon Territory was where the pioneers were heading when they were coming out west. The Oregon Territory represents all of Oregon, Washington, and even parts of Idaho. Now, before even Oregon Territory, we had British fur trapping companies from Astoria all the way up to Vancouver, BC. But our story happens to be on the east coast of the United States, where our ancestors first landed as pilgrims and colonized America. So what does it mean to be a British subject during those times? The flag that we lived under was under the British flag. And therefore, what makes up the British flag? Well, here comes the story. It originates with the St. George's Cross. The St. George's Cross flag was discovered by the Crusaders as they were coming back through Genoa, and they saw this banner and took it back to England and eventually became adopted as the flag of England. In 1601, King Henry's nephew, after the death of Queen Elizabeth, James I became the King of England and Scotland. This is the Scottish flag, also known as the St. Andrew's Cross. So during the times of the colonial times in British America, we had what is known as the King's Colors. Can you see the two representations of the King's St. George's Cross and the St. Andrew's Cross in this? Absolutely. During the American Revolution, there were three primary military squadrons. Those squadrons consisted of the Blue Squadron, typically known as the Naval Squadron. This is the blue ensign. This would be flying on naval ships, and also happens to be the flag of General Gates and General Howe. There's also another squadron known as the Home Guard. Here you still see the St. George's Cross. This flag was also seen during the time of the American Revolution in our ports, but it also was part of the battle that John Paul Jones had with the Serapis when he sailed close to England. It's also known as the Home Guard, protecting the home ground. Lastly, the third squadron is the Red Squadron, or the Army Squadron. This would be General Cornwallis's flag, known as the Red Ensign. This flag literally is the foundation of the American flag. Let me show you. As we come through this, you will note that in 1803, Ireland became part of the United Kingdom. This is known as the St. Patrick's flag, and therefore, all British subjects today, this is the United Kingdom flag. Now, if you go to a soccer match or watch the World Cup and Scotland and England are on the playing field, they will be flying their own distinct flags. The St. Andrew's flag and the St. George's flag. Now, during the Boston Tea Party, the legend says that the Sons of Liberty boarded British ships. Well, of course they boarded British ships. We were British subjects. Well, not only did we have the King's colors flying on those ships, but we also had what is known as the merchant flag. The British ships that were in port during the Boston Tea Party is the Beaver, the Dartmouth, and the Eleanor. Those were all owned or even partly owned by Boston merchants. The protest was the cost of unloading the tea. Now, if you hang two of these flags down off of the Liberty tree, surprisingly, you'll come across having the Sons of Liberty flag. This is where we started having the first stripes. Not long after, Taunton, Massachusetts defaced the British Red Ensign and placed Liberty and Union on their flag and hoisted it in their town square. The British regulars did not appreciate the flag, forcing the townspeople to take the flag back down. But this was the Taunton flag. During the Battle of Lexington and Concord, this is the only flag that the American troops had to rally the troops. This flag came from Bedford, Massachusetts, off of a tavern. In 1775, George Washington was commissioned as the Commander-in-Chief of the American forces. Notice the number of points on the stars. The stars have a very unique story behind them. Remember the sheriffs of Nottingham? They had 5-pointed stars, Robin Hood and so forth. Well, George Washington is more important than a 5-star sheriff. He has 6 points. After he was commissioned, George Washington, he was escorted back to the American forces by the Philadelphia Light Horse. This is a flag that was flown by that unit. George Washington had his own personal private guard, very similar to the Light Horse, but this is the flag of the Commander-in-Chief's Guard. Shortly after that, we had what is known as the Grand Union. This is do you see the red ensign still in here? This is where we had just white stripes placed across the red ensign. This is known as the Grand Union. Now, there were 3 separate symbols of America. You notice that on this flag, this is known as the Bunker Hill flag. You see the St. George's Cross still here, but there's also a pine tree. The pine tree is a symbol from the protests where we had to sell all of our raw materials back to England. We had to sell our white pine. Britain colonies were, or the British Empire was using America's white pines as the mast for their ships. Additionally, we have the first continental flag. Now, as the second symbol of the United States, we have the rattlesnake. This flag right here is the first Navy Jack. We chose the rattlesnake because rattlesnakes do not have any eyelids, and so they're ever watchful. They will not strike unless they are provoked. They will warn you before they strike, and then once they do strike, they will not let go until the victim is succumbed. Doesn't that sound like some American patriots to us? Along with the first Navy Jack, we also have the Gadsden flag. The Gadsden flag was used when General Washington returned to the Continental Army and found that he didn't have the promised gunpowder and learned about munitions that were being stored in the Bahamas and the Caribbean. The ship flew this flag, and when the British ships in that area saw this flag, they parted the ways. Yellow means quarantine, smallpox, and so they wanted nothing to do with this ship, and we sailed into port, grabbed the munitions without a shot being fired. So in June 14th, 1777, there was a resolution made in Congress about what the American flag was to look like. The resolution simply stated that the American flag was to be 13 stripes, alternating red and white, with a field of blue with a star representing new constellation. Now, may I remind you that there was no internet, no form of communication like telephones or telegraph even. There was no photographs of the design or the idea. So every hamlet had their own seamstress and took their own interpretation of the words that they were given. It is said that in the legend that George Washington met with Betsy Ross. Betsy Ross, she was 24 years old, and she was being asked to create many flags, 300 or so. She had no other way of mending and making these flags other than needle and thread. So, when they had the conversation, they basically said that what the stripes were going to be, and she said, "Excuse me, General Washington, if we're going to do something about the stripes, can we please do something about the stars?" And General Washington didn't understand what the issue was about the stars. And basically she says that they're all kinds of shapes and all different sizes, not in any uniform pattern. Can we just do something about that? He says, "Well, what do you suggest?" Well, instead of having 6, 8, 12 pointed stars, let me show you that I can create a 5-pointed star with a single snip of the scissors. And so as the conversation was going, she picked up a piece of cloth and started folding it like I am right now. Conversation was a little bit busy, and I now have a cup here in case I'm thirsty. With a single snip of the scissors, may I present to you a 5-pointed star. And that's the design that Betsy Ross put together for our American flag. Now, how many stars did Betsy have to make for each flag? There's 13 stars, but since we didn't have polyester or anything or nylon, she had to make 13 for each side. So here are some of the variations that came out of the flag resolution. This flag is known as the Eastern Pennsylvania flag. Notice the number of points to the star. It's a little bit opposite of what our current design of flag is. Legend has it that this is the flag that those who were protecting the Liberty Bell after the British took over Philadelphia. This is the unit that protected the Liberty Bell, and this is their flag. We also have the Bennington flag. The Bennington flag, during the Battle of Bennington, the battle was raging back and forth. Sometimes the British were winning the battle, sometimes the Americans were winning the battle. Then we saw that Daniel Morgan was coming across with his Green Mountain Boys, and we knew that the battle was going to be won. Oh, I think that's the wrong flag. I'm sorry. Here's the Green Mountain Boys of Daniel Morgan. But they got a little bit better with the stars, but they totally missed the stripes. Then we have the John Paul Jones flag, the Serapis. They got a little bit creative with the stripes, and they still have multiple points on their stars. Get a little bit closer by going to the Cowpens. South Carolina, Battle of the Cowpens. This is the flag that flew during that battle. Now, some of my ancestors fought underneath the Guilford Courthouse flag. This was the last battle of the colonies before General Cornwallis retreated up to Yorktown. And this here is the Simcoe, or the Yorktown flag that flew at the Battle of Yorktown. Now, the American colonists did not win the American Revolution by themselves. They had help from allies. One of the principal allies that was there that supplied our uniforms was the French. They also helped trap Cornwallis at Yorktown. Marquis de Lafayette was one of the generals during the American Revolution. Many people do not recognize this flag as being a participant in the American Revolution, but they played a very important part. This is the Spanish flag. The American colonies ranged from New England down to Georgia. Florida was still maintained and owned by the Spanish. They kept the British from taking over Florida and going up the Mississippi at the Battle of Pensacola and the Battle of New Orleans and other battles along that way. Then there's the third symbol of the American Revolution, or of America, and that being our wonderful eagle on top of our flagstaff. Where did that eagle come from? Well, it actually comes from the Oneida Indian tribe of the Iroquois. This is their national flag. So we all know and love the Betsy Ross flag. Get that out. This is the Betsy Ross flag. We see this being flown often on the 4th of July. We have another 13-star flag. This is known as the Hopkins or the Alliance flag. This flag, if you ever watched the Olympics and when the Americans received their awards, this is the flag that you'll see. Notice the straightness of those stars. Every one of the flags that I show you today are fully commissioned flags and can be flown at any time. Now, often people forget that we had two wars of independence. This is the 15-star flag. During the War of 1812, this is the flag that flew over Fort McHenry. This flag is unique in that it has 15 stars and 15 stripes. I have a PowerPoint slide that shows what it would look like if we continued that practice and having 50 stars and 50 stripes on our flag today. After the War of 1812, Lewis and Clark had their expedition out to the Pacific Ocean. This is the Lewis and Clark expedition flag that was given to Indian tribes along the trail. This is known as a 34-star flag. This flag has 34 stars, and this is the flag that was flown during the American Civil War. All of the states that had seceded from the Union, their stars remained on the federal flag. To have removed them would have recognized their sovereignty. This is the 34-star flag. This star right here represents the state of Washington when it became a state and joined the Union. Our next flag, many of us were born underneath this flag. This flag is the second longest standing United States flag from 1907 to 1959. This saw World War I, World War II, and Korea. And finally, the flag that we all know and love with the American eagle on it, the 50-star flag. This flag became into existence in 1959 when Hawaii and Alaska joined the Union. And there we go. Here's our eagle, our national symbol of the Americas. I hope you have enjoyed the presentation of the history of the American flag. Thank you.